Hello again. This is again Daniel Neibacher speaking a lesson in universal reconciliation, the Christian system of universal reconciliation. Today I want to speak about knowing Jesus Christ. First, I want to speak about how essential it is to understand that Jesus was honest. And that means, in my mind, that he practiced what he preached. One very important idea of Jesus' teachings was that we should not be evil and that we should be good. We should turn the other cheek when someone wants to slap us. And we should share with what we have, even to the point of giving away what we would need ourselves, for ourselves. I do not think this ethical teaching is something that God himself doesn't obey. In fact, Jesus says it is a teaching that God himself does obey, especially when he comes to it as a man in Jesus Christ. I mean, we know that God is God and we are humans, and so, like many Christians have thought over the centuries, we cannot demand anything from him. We are not sitting in the judgment of God. But at the same time, Jesus simply states that God sends rain to the righteous and the unrighteous, and that God himself is honest, that he is a rock to trust in. So I believe we can take Christ serious, and consequently, Jesus was a man who always turned the other cheek. Because he preached that, and he had to practice it, and he wanted to practice it that way. Sometimes I believe we Christians believe in a Jesus who is glorious, who looks perfect, a beautiful man. But the Bible teaches something else at some places. Let me show you. I use the biblical translation of Young. The translation is called Young's Literal Translation, and I believe it is the best I have found so far. I want to show you a verse from Isaiah 53, chapter 53, verse 3. About Jesus, a prophecy about Jesus. He is despised and left of man, a man of pains and acquainted with sickness, and as one hiding the face from us, he is despised, and we esteemed him not. This means Jesus in his lifetime was probably not a beautiful man. He was not someone where people say, wow, he is charming, or wow, he is very strong, or great, what a great man. He was not a beau. He was a man that was despised and left of man. People didn't like him, plainly. But this was deceiving, of course, because Jesus was a man of pains and acquainted with sickness. He was not ugly. Nobody is really ugly, because we're all made by God, and God doesn't make ugly people. And if you're ugly, it's another kind of beauty in reality. Well, but Jesus was a man of goodness, a man of pains and acquainted with sickness. And this one hiding the face from us, he is despised, and we esteemed him not. What does that mean now? I believe we must read the Bible differently, especially the Gospels and the Epistles. We need to see a Jesus there in the words of the Bible who turned the other cheek. Not just on the cross, not just in the beatings before the cross, but also during the other parts of his ministry. Yes, people say he took a whip and cleaned the temple. But what does that mean? I mean, can a man who turns the other cheek not get mad sometimes about severe kinds of unrighteousness? The temple was meant to be a prayer house for the people, a place where they could go with their worries and fears and problems. And that is something where goodness can become a lion, a roaring lion. And that's what Jesus did at that point. The Bible says, "Zeal for the house of the Lord has consumed me." But if you think about it, it was a very meek way to teach these people a lesson. The God of the Old Testament, the way people knew God before, he would have struck them all dead, or something like that. But Jesus simply took a whip and made a sign. The money changers returned, the temple went on as before, I think, but Jesus showed what happened. And in the times of history and in Christianity now, we know what that meant. And to this day, most of the church doesn't sell the will of God for money. That's what I think so anyway. It could be better in many things, but I could be better too. I'm not wanting to disrespect the church. Well, let me wait, I must look at my notes. Yes, we must see in Jesus' ministry and in the ministry of the apostles men who turned the other cheek. If we keep that in mind, we might have a different access to the personality of these people, of Jesus and of the apostles. For example, let us take the Epistle of James. I would think, at least this was my experience, when I read this epistle first, I thought here's a strong man speaking, who denounces injustice with furious anger. You know what I mean. This kind of speaking that is impressive. But if you see there a man who turned the other cheek always, maybe James was a man whom we would now think was very weak, with lots of doubts and worries. And when he says that we shouldn't doubt because it's an unsteady thing, perhaps he was fearfully reminding himself that he was... Wait a moment, please. Yes, Mom? Ja. Ja. Ja, ich hab's gehört. When he said that maybe he had problems and anguish and with himself, and that the way that nobody was really following the Sermon of the Mount as much as Jesus had wanted it. That James was a melancholic man who was deeply disappointed about people and who was hurt in his soul that he himself couldn't be perfect. I mean, let us think for a moment that these 12 apostles all had mental problems. Let's imagine it. We live in a world where God doesn't heal every pain and every illness. That's just reality. And maybe God left these apostles too in mental illness if they had one. Or maybe God doesn't look at mental illness like mental illness, just as things people have and or don't have. Not as illness, but as character part and personality part, and it belongs to them somehow, like my illness. Or let us look at Jude. It's the epistle of Jude. It's an epistle that's brimming with power, with righteous indignation. But maybe Jude had doubts too, and he wasn't always knowing, am I speaking the right thing now, or am I speaking the wrong thing? What is the Spirit demanding from me again? I don't understand it. I believe God hides the reality of the gospel from us. Instead, we are told what we could need now. And I suppose God has sympathy with us and allows us to be strong. But Apostle Paul gives us some clues. The apostles were dying, and they were not dying, they were living. What Paul said, I don't have the verse, I can't remember the verse right now. It was something about, we are dying every day, but living every day. We are persecuted and we liberate others, and so on. Let us think about the Bible in this way, about the biblical people from the New Testament. They are all heroes, yes, but we must remember they are humans, and in the way Jesus became a human, we must also become humans. Only then can there be humility and true peace. Okay, that's all what I wanted to say in this video. I hope you have a good day, and I wish you well, and that every good thing happens in your life, and that you feel peace with God, and that Jesus is with you and protects you from all harm and puts a smile on your lips. And I wish you a good day, and goodbye for now.